Welcome. Hello. Welcome. Thank you. With this sort of excitement in the audience, I hate to break it up, but we do have to get on with the show. I'm Joe Hedzima. I'm chairman of the Global MIT Enterprise Forum. For over 25 years, the Enterprise Forum has provided quality education, advice, and connectivity to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship communities around the world. In this fine tradition, I'm pleased to welcome you to this MIT Enterprise Forum global broadcast entitled Angel Groups in Action. This program on angel investing is being brought to you from Kresge Auditorium at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. For those at remote sites, we have over 600 participants here in Kresge, including many of the movers and shakers of the Boston area entrepreneurial ecosystem. We also have several, 60 or so alums back for reunions, so welcome for your reunions. I also welcome the members of other entrepreneurial ecosystems from around the world who are receiving this program at 54 viewing sites, a record number of sites for our broadcast. 40 sites are receiving it live by satellite or webcast tonight. 14 sites will be watching on delayed broadcast. We have 8 international sites, including Buenos Aires, Argentina, 2 sites in Brazil, 2 sites in Spain, and sites in Japan and Canada. I also found out that there'll be a playing in Bulgaria next week. So we certainly have a global reach here. This program has been produced in collaboration with the Angel Capital Association and the Kauffman Foundation. The Angel Capital Association is North America's professional alliance of angel groups. This fast-growing association brings together 200 angel organizations in the United States and Canada to share best practices, network, and develop data about the field of angel investing. The Kauffman Foundation is the foundation for entrepreneurship, catalyzing entrepreneurial success in business, education, and social innovation. On behalf of the MIT Enterprise Forum, I thank the Angel Capital Association and the Kauffman Foundation for their work on this program, and we look forward to future collaborations. Thank you also to Roy Morris of the MIT Enterprise Forum Global Board, who's also a member of the Washington, D.C. chapter, for his work in coordinating the program. Well, quality programs such as this would not be possible without the financial support and advice of our sponsor partners. They include Goodwin Procter's Technology Companies Group, which is a highly focused team of 150 lawyers, which provides dedicated representation to over 500 emerging companies and entrepreneurs, 100 venture capital and private equity firms, and many leading investment banks in the United States. Wilmer Cutler Pickering, Hale & Dorr is internationally recognized for his premier corporate practice. The law firm has more than 1,000 lawyers in 12 cities, specializing in the legal needs of emerging high-tech companies. Ropes & Gray, which provides legal representation to numerous technology engineering companies at all stages of growth, as well as venture capital and private equity firms that finance them. Over the past 2 years, Ropes & Gray's negotiated and closed over 200 venture deals, raising more than $2 billion. And the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, YEO, which is the premier peer-to-peer global community network and resource for entrepreneurs. YEO represents 5,500 members in 160 cities and 40 countries worldwide. YEO members are under the age of 40, which leaves me out, and are founders, co-founders, and owners or controlling shareholders of businesses with annual revenues of at least $1 million. I've personally worked with each of these organizations on a variety of projects over the years, and I can say that they are premier firms. They say that you're known by the company you keep, and we are proud to have them as our partners. Right from the beginning, there's been a lot of excitement about this Angel Group in Action program. When I was thinking of topics, I realized we'd never done a global broadcast on angel investing, and I was sort of aware that there was some changes happening. I picked up the phone and called James Geschweiler, chair of the Angel Capital Association, and indeed found out that there were significant changes occurring in angel investing. I think, James, it took us maybe a minute to realize that this was going to be a great program. So over the next hour, you're going to learn about the current state of angel investing and the fundamental changes that every entrepreneur and angel investor needs to understand. What is even more exciting is what James and I realized on the conference call. That is, our chapters of the Enterprise Forum and the angel groups overlap geographically in many markets. And just as all politics is local, we realize that all investing is local. So at many of our viewing sites, we're bringing together angel capital groups and Enterprise Forum chapters to watch this broadcast. Following the program, at many sites, there will be local panels to talk about how to take the lessons learned here and apply them in the local environment. An enduring benefit of this global program will be a connectivity of the local angel groups and entrepreneurs who, working together, we think will build new companies and expand innovation in their local communities. For this panel, we've assembled an all-star panel. To introduce them properly would take the entire evening, so I refer you to their bios on our website, which is mitenterpriseforum.org. Before we begin, please turn off your cell phones. And one of you has lost a cell phone. If your number is 401 and ends in 8707, you can pick it up after the program up front here.
They won't give it to him now.
I won't give out the whole number. Dialing for dollars, as they say. Well, Dan Roach is moderator for this program. I was going to tell some humorous jokes, but that would take all night. But please join me in welcoming Dan and our panel for tonight's program.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'm Dan Roach from Brown & Brown, and thank you all for coming. What we'll do is we'll start with some quick introductions. Starting over at the distant left is Professor Jeff Sohl from the University of New Hampshire, then Professor Ed Roberts from MIT, Jerry Schelfeld, an experienced angel, entrepreneur, and investor. To my immediate left is James Geschweiler, another investor and entrepreneur. And we're going to start off with some slides to sort of paint the picture and give us the background as to the size and the scale and basically the shape of the economics of the angel investing environment. So, Professor.
Thank you, Dan. And just to give a little context of this angel environment, as you can see up there, where the angels tend to operate is in that $50,000 to $1 million range, in that what we call that information and funding gap. Very inefficient market, hard to find angels. Angels say it's hard to find deals. And then there's that secondary capital gap in that $2 to $5 million range, which is as a result, as you'll see, of venture capital funds getting larger and larger and larger and doing much later stage deals. And I will keep these comments very brief since we have a distinguished panel here. But if you look at the size of the market, a little bit of context, and keep in mind this market dates back to Alexander Graham Bell received several $1,000s from 2 angel investors. So we're talking well over 100 years old on this market. In 2004, the best estimates are that a little over 200,000 angels were actively investing. Now, there was a lot more that didn't make investments this year. And the points to keep in mind is the $22.5 billion and the 48,000 ventures, because when that's compared to the venture capital industry, you'll see how they operate in very different spaces. Sustainable growth, as you could see, from 02 and 03. What we like to see is reasonable growth in that market, not any ups and downs. We've already seen the 2000 craziness, and the forest has been culled, and luckily we're moving along at a sustainable rate. Venture capital funds, again, over the last 3 years, reasonably steady between $20 and $21 billion. But if you look at the number of deals they've done, and take, for example, in 2004, a little less than 3,000 deals, that's in the entire United States. Average deal size is about $7 million, and compare that to an angel average deal size of about $400,000. So there's quite a different space they do. The angels are the seed investors. Now, to drive that point home, and also keep in mind that about 75% of those angel deals, of those venture capital deals, are refinancings. Now, if you look at the seed and startup financing for venture capitalists, again, looking at 04, and this has been a historical trend for the last decade or so, only 171 seed and startup deals, about 6% of that entire market. So it's never been a large market with respect to the seed and startup stage, and in fact, that's where the angels play. Just a few minor points, because I'm sure this will come up in some of the Q&A and some of the other panelists' comments, but investors always invest close to home. About 90% of their deals are within a half a day's travel time, and there's several reasons for that. Being cash-down entrepreneurs, they bring a lot of value. They bring a lot more than just capital. And in fact, some of the research indicates that angels not only enjoy it, but get a type of what we call psychic income out of it. So it's the active part of their portfolio. And also, entrepreneurs claim that, in fact, it is the money that they appreciate, but it's really the value add that is just important. Because they're in the early seed stage, very patient capital. And again, they invest their own money. This market is dominated by individuals. They may be members of the group, they may be members of the group and still do deals outside, but the vast majority of the market is made up of individuals doing their own deals, deciding when to write their check. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dan.
Sure. Thank you. James, I just wanted to ask you to illuminate the audience a little bit about angel groups, angel networks. It's a force that's coming. We've seen it evolve over the past few years. Could you spend a minute and talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, and first thing I'd like to say is, what do we mean by an angel? It's a term that gets kicked around a lot, and to be blunt, I don't even really like it. Strange for the chairman of the Angel Capital Association to say that, but it's kind of a loaded term, right? It either sort of sets expectations too high, like people are going to be just really, really nice, or too low, like they're unprofessional. The reality is these are almost all, as Jeff mentioned, business leaders. They know how to run companies, and they do investing part-time, as opposed to a venture capitalist, who in fact may be the same person, right? But they have other people's money that they're investing, and it's that difference in the role. And what's happened and changed in this market, particularly since 2001, as many of you in this room probably would like to forget, a lot of people got a very strong reminder that investing is in fact really hard. And a lot of their friends got together and said, boy, you know, I like investing, I like working with early stage companies, but you got to keep an eye on them and you got to do all this diligence, and I'm busy doing other things. Why don't we do it together? And that way we can share the load, and if nothing else, there'll be safety in numbers. So since 2001, there have been a tremendous growth in angel groups. We estimated there were about 50 or so in 2001. There are now over 200 nationwide and in Canada. There are some groups like the one I manage, Common Angels, which were formed in 1998, Band of Angels in Silicon Valley, 95, but those tend to be the exceptions. Most groups are relatively new, and now they're hiring managers. They're becoming very professional, very structured.
Okay, thank you. Ed, could you talk a little bit about, in your experience, you know, what is an angel? We saw some of the characteristics on Jeff's slides. There were some things on there that were difficult to quantify, like psychic capital, things like that. Could you talk a little bit about, in your background, what you think a characteristic is?
Well, I think that Jeff is the expert in the gathering of the data. The activity that I've had in the angel area has been both looking at the world from the eyes of entrepreneurs, who I've looked at a lot, but also participating as an angel personally. And what I've found relative to most angels, but not all, is that most angels, in fact, are in the business not for the sake solely of return on investment and trying to make more money. Most of the angels already have a reasonable amount of money. And while they're always willing to make more, what they're really seeking is they're seeking a very different form of benefit. So you have people, particularly in Common Angels, for example, where we focused for years on software only and now getting into other kinds of technologies as well. In Common Angels, almost everyone there is an entrepreneur or has been an entrepreneur. When you get a bunch of entrepreneurs in a room looking at a bunch of startup entrepreneurs, there's a very different feeling of relationship among the people. The investor can readily see that, hey, I could be on their side of the fence because that's an idea I might have had, or I may have had something like that once, or I can see how it relates, I can see how I would have done it, and they really put themselves into a very different role. So the angels, as we see them anyway, are people who want to participate in much more than money. They very frequently want to get into the act of close relationships to the entrepreneurs. Part of it, I think, is that the angel realizes that by doing angel investing, they have a chance to stay young. You have a chance to associate yourself with somebody else's entrepreneurial spirit, endeavor, energy level, and the like. What I learned as a teacher at MIT for years is that by teaching students who are averaging 25 years of age, I come closer every year to being like, thinking like, and acting like, and having knowledge of people who are 25. And I think that an angel can get that same kind of symptomatic thrill, that if I work with entrepreneurs all the time, I can continuously sense that I'm like those entrepreneurs. And it's a great payoff.
Okay, thank you. I've got a bunch of questions I'm going to follow on as to whether angel groups are better or not quite as good as individual angels. But I wanted to ask Jerry a question about sort of the difference structurally, maybe between the way, an angel thinks and acts as an investor versus a venture investor. If you're going out and what are the term sheets substantially different? Are the valuations substantially different? Do you have a sense as to why is angel money different from any other kind of money?
Well, James pointed out the obvious first difference is that the venture folks are working on behalf of their limited partners and have a very finite promise that was made to those limited partners and have an obligation to act on behalf of them in their investment cycles. Whereas, of course, the angels come in many shapes and forms and backgrounds and desires. And it becomes extraordinarily important, in my mind, to know that we understand as much as we can about what motivates their investment cycle, some of the things that Ed pointed out, what appetite they have for deals and what stage of growth, what size of deal they're comfortable in participating. And so in understanding that lay of the land becomes very important in understanding how they operate. So you'll find in most angel groups now, and James has set a standard for this, you'll find a bio of each of the players that are working in the groups to help you get that match between what drives them forward. The whole issue of term sheets is a good and new discipline that's being built into the angel community. The early deals were all over the place, from, I'll say, in the flip way, scraps of paper, all the way up to very elaborate deals. And some of them didn't serve the folks that were getting the money very well because it didn't anticipate subsequent investments. So the lawyers had a field day unraveling what was done in those crazy first deals. What I see happening, and last year I visited about 6 different angel groups, is a consistent pattern that's setting the stage for maybe at least a starting point of a common term sheet. What those terms are, we may want to discuss as a group, but there's a very exciting standardization coming about in this industry.
Okay, well, let me just throw out a question to the general group. I mean, to continue on, the theme of angel groups versus individual angels, do you think is it a good trend? Are there going to be better deals made? Is it going to be a more efficient movement of capital throughout the economy? Do people have different
I think that's an argument we have every week. I'm smiling because I see my friend George McQuilkin over here. George,
well, let's start it now.
Yeah, why not? Where's the chair? We can.
East Coast Angels.
Yeah, George runs a group in New Hampshire called East Coast Angels, and we've had a running debate. Of course, being from New Hampshire, they have very low overhead, no taxation, and run very, very cheaply. And George likes to brag that his returns are better than ours, whereas Common Angels, of course, is very elaborate, has all this process. One of the things that excites me a lot about the Angel Capital Association, the growth of these groups, and also the fact that we're doing this nationwide is this is a form of entrepreneurship. You have groups in New Hampshire tailoring their structure for what New Hampshire needs, and groups in Massachusetts, and in Atlanta, and in Michigan, and in California, and in Hawaii, and Calgary, and so on. Toronto, each have slightly different structures that match the industries in their area, their people, their style. So I think right now what we're learning is really what needs to be done and how to do it well. We'll find out better in a few years. Professor, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting. Keep in mind, over the last 2 decades, angels always invested in groups anyway, 5 to 7 angels in a group. They just never had a name, and the media never called them that much. which kind of they liked. The advantage of working as individuals is there's a lot of hurdles. When they are hard to find, then the entrepreneurs have to climb those hurdles to find. The difficulty with having a group is anybody can go on the web or go to any website and find the 200 groups and send 200 business plans, which then puts a burden on these angel groups to sort out these business plans. So the groups certainly raise the visibility, but again, the vast majority, over 60% of the market, is still done by individuals, individuals writing their checks and getting together with their cohorts in small groups. But again, the groups do perform a very valuable function.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing the groups do is they aggregate capital. There are very, very few individuals out there who are capable of writing, and there's a regular practice, write $500,000 checks. But a lot of angel groups, at least in this town and across the country, can pool together $500,000. That gap that Jeff showed you is real. We feel it every day. And a lot of young companies out there find it very difficult to raise money in that amount. $500,000, million, $2 million.
So there ought to be something that is similar, namely angels and angel groups both are different from venture capitalists because they're investing early stage, typically, and secondly, they're investing small, relatively. And if you then tried to compare angels as individuals, even though they may be having a few of them together, versus organized groups, I think that's the distinction. You're talking about angels invest with 2s or 3s, and he's saying angels invest in common angels. We're investing 10, 15 together at a time to invest, or 20, right. So again, I think the distinction would be on size. The size of the deal of individuals, even clustered, will be much smaller than the size of a deal of an organized angel group. So if I look at the things that I've done as a member of Common Angels, I've put in $25,000 or $50,000 in a deal, but the average deal would be $500,000 to $1.2 million. As an individual, I put in $50,000 to $100,000 in a deal, but the average deal would be $200,000 to $300,000. And that's a very big difference, which says, I have a feeling, you have the data, I don't, it says to me, I'll bet individual angels working with just small clusters are at the much smaller end of the investment cycle, but might have a much higher potential hit when they hit on the rare occasions.
Well, and some of the things we're trying to do with Angel Capital Association is to keep track of this so that also I can show to Ed that we're doing okay. But I want to come.
You're doing okay.
Come and ask Jerry too, because he's gone around and looked at 6 angel groups. I think, and this is going to test it. There's also a difference, not just in terms of capital, but also stage, because when you get 2 or 3 individuals around a very young company, they can say, "Aha, I get it. I know you've got just a prototype. I know you don't even know what market, but we get it." At Common Angels, when we get 20 or 30 people together, not only is the scrutiny that much greater, but also tend to be the issues around the company. You know, it's old enough to, it's been usually a year old, maybe 18 months. It may have 1 or 2 customers, there may be 5 or 6 employees. There's more to talk about, and you can benefit from more industry leaders.
Do they often have, I'm sorry to interrupt first, but do they often have angel money?
Individual angels, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of I would say 80 to 90% of the deals that come our way already have between
Angel
50 and 250 or 300,000 of angel money.
Sure.
But Jerry, what have you seen?
As I went around the groups, one of the great values beyond the financial metaphor we've been talking about is the ability and willingness to reach into the risk of extraordinarily early deals. And I don't know if there's yet a pattern, but one of the benefits of the angel investing is that they can go in a place where the larger firms and the venture capital folks can't go. But what I have seen, the more notable difference, is that the technical or the expertise that those angels represent is, to me, an awesome dimension of this new world we're going into in angel investing, in that there's people who have been there, done that, and have an important need to contribute that experience back into the running and building of those companies. So I know we're all focused on the numbers for a moment, but let's not forget that there's a wide sweep of expertise. But the agenda for those angels goes even further. At Cherrystone Angels in Rhode Island, a group that I helped form, We actually have a 6-part checklist of the reasons or motivations for making an investment. And what we do is in each bucket, we'll have a 1 to 10 rating and sort of a quiet score sheet we keep. And there's such broad categories as a desire to help Rhode Island build technology-based companies. That's an economic development play, but clearly some people in that audience differentiate themselves by a willingness to reach into that space that no one else is willing to do.
But how much, on that point, one thing that gets kicked around on angel investors is, oh, they must be softies, right? They're willing to benefit the local economy. How much do you give on the financial return point? Because I've had so many angels tell me, oh no, we're building a good company. That's the only way to build good businesses for Rhode Island. You got to be successful. Is that flexible or inflexible?
I don't know about this softy part, James, but I do know that beyond all the rhetoric, absolutely a good deal prevails. No matter which group environment you go in, people are taking this risk, whatever other reasons, because they perceive it as a good deal. And I think when we lose sight of that, we better take a very careful look at what we're doing as a group.
I want to disagree with you. I want to disagree with you, Jerry, because we did a deal with Common Angels a couple of years ago that I participated in as an investor. I would say the primary motivation of the people who invested was social motivation. We saw an interesting deal brought to us by a young guy who was highly motivated, and while we saw that we could possibly make some money, maybe, I believe that most of the people who put up money said, here's a fantastically motivated young guy who wants to do something wonderful if he succeeds. If he really succeeds, we'll make some money. If he doesn't succeed, so what? We can afford to lose the money investing in what this guy's trying to do. And what he was trying to do was to deal with the problem of alcoholism on college campuses. And I think that most of us invested in it because we liked his motives. Now, he's doing okay today, and he's now gotten professional venture capital money coming in behind our angel money. He still isn't there. Nobody's yet making any return on the investment. But I'm quite sure that if we just went to each of the persons who signed a check and said, why did you really write that check? It was that I was engaged in an activity in which I liked him and I felt better about myself because of why I did this.
And there's really actually no argument there. There are those exceptions. And then there are multiple agendas as to why the transactions are made. But if I were to look across them, we always step back and say, does it have the potential, at least for the upside? Now, are we willing to wait longer? Are we willing to take other exceptions? Of course. But if it doesn't ring out to pull you through on the upside potential, I'd say it'd be a hard sell to your group.
I would like to make the comment. It is a financial deal, and I agree, but the way we like to describe it is they want to be involved and get the excitement of the startup, the investor does, but they don't want the sleepless nights of worrying about payroll on a Thursday. So I think that's the key. As far as the deal size, Ed, there's no really not to get, okay, I'll just say no difference between the deal size between individuals and groups, because these individuals can be as many as 7 or 8 people outside of the groups, each putting around $50,000 to $60,000 or $80,000. The one thing that I think with this psychic income and living close to home, remember this is the active part of an angel's portfolio. There's the part of their portfolio that's in the mutual funds and in the passive investing, but this is where they can not only get some excitement out of being active investors and working with young people, as Ed was saying, and feeling like you're 25 again, but at the same time, feeling that with this experience one brings to the deal, I'm also making it a better deal, which means at the end, I will make a better return for myself and a better return for the entrepreneur. So it's kind of a dual edge in the sense that I'm giving something back, but at the same time, the more I work with the company, I'll be able to get a better return.
I've sat now on 2 different angel group screening committee processes, and it's sort of a 2-step deal. First, it vets down, is it a reasonable deal, a good deal, upside potential, and then does it match the interest of the group? And I'm thinking now that probably more deals fail in that second gate as it goes down through the funnel, if you will, of the process than of the deal's metrics itself. And I think it's important for those approaching an angel group to spend some time here. We see and at Launchpad about, and this is round numbers, about 20 deals a month, of which we'll look at 2. That's a 10-to-1 ratio of deals in to ones that we'll go forward with. That means that 9 of them aren't making one of those 2 gates. Either it's not a good deal or it's not matching the interests of the group. So I think the takeaway of that is not only to make sure it's a sound deal, but make sure you're really probing what turns that group on, what kind of investments are they making. And that's where all these other items come in.
And that's
only
the
thing
idea
I've
with the
heard
visibility. The higher the visibility, the more plans you're going to get, the more screening you're going to have to do.
Well, the thing I've heard so far that's really troubling is that all of these guys are running around thinking that they're 25, but that's a different. we can deal with that. I was wondering about that 50-cent CD.
That's why
Professor
we're on
Roberts
the couch
had.
here.
Wait,
Right.
and you started this.
What did I do bad?
25.
It's voyeurism.
So
Years old.
is it for the types of companies that you're looking for, or that angels are looking for? Is it a given that they're going to need to see the ability to raise venture money? Is that an absolute given?
And I think that's something that has come more and more to the fore in angel investing. I think that was an assumption back in 1999 and 2000. Let's make no secret about that. In 2001, most people realized there wasn't venture money. There was almost no deals done. In 2001, 2002, there were some done in 2003, a few more in 2004. You saw the numbers that Jeff showed. It's been a very lonely capital market. But also, I think there's been an important reminder to a lot of angels that whatever the motivations, it still has to be about the money in order to make the group and the investment process work. If you lose a lot of money, it's just all going to fall apart. And so one thing that we're doing with Angel Capital Association is actually starting to track returns and investments. And I know for several of the angel groups in Boston, including our own, we actually have, Common Angels has a fund, 2 actually, that co-invest with our group, so we can compare to venture capital. And we are beating our venture capital average pretty soundly. And that's something that, you know, whatever the motivations and sort of the complex psychological issues that come about, is the investments can work.
What's amazing about that statistic is that the angel investment is happening at such an early stage in the cycle that the risk that the angels absorb at being at that space versus what the venture folks are taking later on is an incredible difference. And yet the performance is higher.
Well, in the long run, you hope so, because early stage ought to, you know, on average, give better returns than later, but that has not been true the past few years, particularly.
I think you make a good point, because that baffles us with you would think the risk is obviously higher and the returns would be that much different, but what our data shows is, and we can't really give an average because an average doesn't give it justice, but it's between 20 and 40% per annum on a portfolio. So that's what they're looking for going into the deal for angels. But I think the point about, do you have to get venture capital money? A great angel deal is if you could put in maybe 2 rounds of angel money and exit, sell it, go through a buyback without going through institutional venture capital money. You avoid cram downs and everybody's happy.
No dilution. That's the same point I was going to make, Dan, when you said the criteria that they're going to go through the angel round and then do a venture capital round. Because I think that what's happened during the tough periods of the last several years is that angel groups have learned that they really are in trouble if they depend upon that venture capital round later on, that they're going to get squeezed in the process, because that's what they learned the last time around. So I think more and more, we certainly talk about how many rounds of financing is this going to take till it's in a standalone position. If someone comes in and the deal looks like it might very well be the only round of financing, or there'll be one more round, but we'll be able to do it within our own group with friends. And we have more friends now. So we go outside of single groups to go into clusters of groups, or single groups like Common Angels and friendly small venture capital funds that are very targeted and work closely with us, where the cram down problem doesn't arise. Or at least it doesn't arise in the same fashion. So I think that the angel groups have to have gotten smarter. Otherwise, they'll go out of business for lack of performance, because the venture capitalists will essentially drive their returns down if you end up depending upon the venture capitalists.
Not all groups are as large or as powerful as Commons Angels, but with James' leadership, we've now formed this regional model where we're able to syndicate deals not only amongst the players in a given group, but amongst groups. And we're working that through. That's still a lot of mechanics that are involved in getting that to play well. But the power of that is, again, twofold. One is certainly being able to meet the capital requirements amongst friends, and two, the pool of expertise that we can now pull into these companies doubles up as we start to syndicate. That group has been in existence, what, about a year now,
About a year.
James? And we're just starting to figure out how this is going to work with mechanics of due diligence and term sheets and consistent models. But the potential for sustaining this, I believe, is going to happen at the next level.
And I think when you said angel groups, well, I would say angels in general have gotten smarter. But just to throw one thing out, I hope we're not getting, well, the next paper that you'll see eventually, boring academic paper, it talks about the institutionalization possibly of the angel market. And I would hate to see that all of a sudden the angels all join groups, get organized, and boom, 5 years from now, I'll be showing a slide and say, oh yeah, see these angel groups, average deal size 7 million, and we now have a seed start.
If we have that problem, it'll be a good problem to have. I mean,
no, I don't think it's a bad problem. I want to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to happen because, I mean, remember what you were saying. Most of the people who are angels are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are some of the strongest-willed, most independently minded people. I mean, look at this room. Look at who's involved. It's hard to get these people together. I think there is a natural limit and a cap.
Well, you're right. Herding cats is tough.
Yeah, it is.
Well, have you seen instances where you have competed with some smaller funds for deals?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But, one thing I don't want to dwell on too much is sort of an us versus them of venture capital. There was a survey
some of them are here tonight.
Yeah, well, I know. And really, some of my best friends are venture capitalists, really. Some of my best friends went to Harvard, too. No, really,
Careful,
they're nice
good,
people.
Careful.
No, they didn't. We're safe here.
No, but seriously, there was a survey done recently out of George Washington University asking angels and venture capitalists what they thought of each other. And I think it was like 90-something% said, we're complementary. And why is that? Well, on most deals, there is going to be some sort of progression like Jeff was showing. And some there won't be. And, let's not carve this out too tightly. There are lots of venture capitalists who do early stage investing. It's a different form of early stage investing. It often can be very instant company, let's put a bunch of money in. There are models where I would absolutely recommend to the entrepreneur, that's the way to go. And I think a lot of angels take a much more organic, step-by-step approach. There are some VCs who do, but you got to look at the fit. And the fit's really on a case-by-case basis. But yes, we collaborate very well with many of the smaller venture firms because I think the dollars are comparable.
Okay, very good. Just another point on sort of the individual, maybe less aggregated angels that don't have a lot of, visibility. They don't have a website, things like that. How have you found them to go to find their deals? How do angels find investing opportunities? And this is to the group. There's no one specific.
That's one of the advantages of it. Don't forget, we're talking about over 60 to 70% of the market is individuals. So they love it because guess what? The entrepreneurs have to find them. They have their own informal sources of deals so that the deals that come to them are already at a point where there's a higher probability that they could invest in those. And it's less screening out for them because of this whole informal network of lawyers, other investors, venture capitalists that will refer deals down to them that aren't the right size. So that is a very, it's a network that exists that works pretty good. And I think just one comment, I think you're absolutely right, James, that right now the venture capitalists fit a different space than angels, a very important space. They have two spaces and two very important spaces.
So I think one of the big differences is that the individual angel has to be reached and reach out on informal networking bases, whereas an angel group suddenly becomes an institutionalized activity that can now have visibility, have a brochure, have a website, and the like. All of the kinds of mechanisms that Jeff mentioned are the traditional mechanisms for reaching and reaching out on the angel role. That is the commercial banker, the accounting firm, the lawyer, the just wise and established business person in the community, all of whom, in 1990, when I published my book on entrepreneurship, We were talking about what to do if you were an entrepreneur. And what I was saying is, go seek out accomplished, effective business people, people who are leaders in the accounting profession and the lawyers. Go talk to your bank and discuss with them. They will know others interested in investing in early stage firms and the like, and it works both ways. Now, that isn't the primary source of flow for common angels or others that are well established.
And there have been attempts to aggregate your own venture capital network that you inherited and that TCN were attempts to aggregate it, but really stood in the face of those folks that wanted to remain individuals and remain informal in that process. And as
it didn't
yet,
work.
Right. As yet, we haven't seen the good successful model of the trying to put an infrastructure around that informality.
Right.
And if I remember the early studies, Jeff, that came out of UNH, they focused on the fact that it was that sense of individualism or even not wanting the publicity that was common to the early studies. So I think you have to respect those folks for wanting to operate the way they do. If they didn't want to operate that way, they'd join the groups.
Right.
And so now you have the challenge of trying to find them.
Right. You're absolutely right. And I mean, they're not going to hang the shingle and say, hi, I'm Jeff, have money, we'll invest. Because you can imagine the phone calls, but the groups give them a little bit of that for cover, the storefront.
But it's
some of
interesting.
the audience might be interested to know that Jeff's predecessor at University of New Hampshire started the studies of angel activities and also started an angel/entrepreneur matching service in which it's long in advance of websites where you found your mate via matching technologies. This guy at University of New Hampshire was doing an entrepreneur registry and an angel registry and attempting to go match similar people and the like. And he did it for several years. And then he turned it over. Then he turned it over to the MIT Enterprise Forum of Cambridge, which took over the service and ran it for several years. And the bad news is it didn't work. So however good it may be to meet your loved one, you weren't meeting your loved one with a checkbook relative to.
I think the
But
problem was.
I got one comment, and this is a good plug for MIT. Bill also, my mentor at UNH, was the one who coined the term angel from Broadway. And the first academic paper that ever was published with the name angel in it was the MIT Sloan Management Review.
Right.
In 1981.
And several of our PhDs then went and repeated his studies in other communities and the like. So this is a new phenomenon for academic research, but trying to replicate the informal network hasn't worked very well. The informal network seems to work much better than doing formal computer matching approaches.
But one thing that's really important to the entrepreneur is this term that Jerry brought up and Dan did, which is the terms. And you were talking about the individual angel versus the group. And absolutely, there is crosstalk, there is fertilization. And I personally think, and when we get to Q&A, we can find out how much agreement or disagreement is on this, it's good for the entrepreneur. Because those terms, a lot of people get very fixated on them and say, oh, gosh, you got the same terms as a venture capitalist. Ah, darn, bad. Right. And the thing is, what those terms really do is try to create balance between management and an investor. And when they're done right, that relationship can exist in harmony. When they're done badly by someone who doesn't do it all the time and hasn't really figured out that, they may be experts in a particular business sector, but they're not experts in how all these terms work together. And then suddenly down the road, the entrepreneur and the investor say, oh my gosh, what did we get ourselves into? And they got to, who was it who said the lawyers, get to redo everything? Knowing how to structure those terms has been the number one thing that I've had individual angels come to me and common angels and say, I'm not going to join your group. I like your folks, that's fine. I do my own thing. By the way, can I see your terms? And understand how that works is a nice complement to their full-time business activities.
And there's very few companies that only need one round of investment. And what the terms do is set up the stage for subsequent rounds and really establish the rules that will set the boundaries around that first set of investments. So it's a protection on both sides, as well as the balance between the offerer and the offeree in this case. So, it's taken a while, I think, for the industry to grab this thing and really come to that common set of term sheets. And it's clearly a step forward.
Well, let me just throw it out again to the group. If we're going to get a little tactical and talk about terms, what term have you seen or that is commonly need to be unwound in the next round? Is it terms related to anti-dilution? Are there terms about valuation? Is there any particular common thing that you see that maybe an individual angel is doing that needs to be corrected?
See, we're on the other side of the desk.
Why should I share this? No, I think that
We're among friends.
Yeah, we're among friends, right? 6,000 of them. No, I think the bad movie of 2001 was inserted both by angels and venture capitalists as something called a multiple X liquidation preference. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that lovely phrase, it means, Dan, I get my money back. And then I get my money back again. And I get it again. And now we can start sharing, because what's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine, and what's yours is still mine. And this was a really bad term because it was an artificial price adjustment that a lot of people had to a down market, but the principle still applies today. And that is, you want to make sure that everybody's incentives are aligned. And what that did was it said, you got this hurdle that's the stack of all the money that's gone into the company, plus that again, plus that again. And what did entrepreneurs do? They said, oh, I got no chance. I guess I'm just going to swing for the fences. You know, that's the only way I'm going to get anything out of this. Well, what happens when you swing for the fences? You strike out more. And that isn't good for the investor. So if you can't fix price by some adjustment in term, you can't fix risk by dabbling in, oh, let's dial this differently or that. You create the balance in the relationship, and if you can't find the balance, don't get married, you know, to go back to the dating metaphor here. You know, it's going to be a bad relationship.
To answer your question another way, Dan, I think the dilution or anti-dilution and ratchet provisions are still somewhat problematic and probably a work in progress. That they were set up to the point where several deals that we looked at when matched against the pro forma numbers shown in the business plan would argue you shouldn't take the deal. So I think there's a space that's going to need time and understanding of how better to protect yourself from some of those rules, which if you were the source of money you would want in there, but I think may be at the edge of being a disincentive for the startup company. And I think we need to work on that going forward.
Right. And I think the big lesson for the entrepreneur is don't go looking for money when you need it. Look for it, figure it out, how far ahead you're going to need it, and strategically look for it. Because if you need it to meet payroll in 2 weeks, well, you're going to get some onerous terms, which is going to hurt you and hurt your early stage investors. And while terms help, and you need to have terms in the early stage that are set up for later stage deals, the less money tends to call a lot of the shots. So,
well, as long as, if you never try to raise money when you're running out of money.
Exactly, because then the last money is going to say whatever it wants.
No term solves that. But to flip the question around for the entrepreneur and the investors is, instead of talking about, what's the bad way to do it, there are lots of bad ways to do it. Common Angel standard terms, and we have shared these with folks in Angel Capital Association, other folks have shared theirs, and there are some subtle differences, but ours is pretty much what I would call a straight vanilla standard preferred stock. Why is it preferred? We may be called Common Angels, we don't take common stock for a variety of reasons. But first and foremost is because the entrepreneur, under standard convention and tax code, can price their options differently than the preferred stock. Also, as an outside investor, you don't know what's going on in the company as well as management does. You might, under your class of stock, need things like information rights. You might want to have a little bit of protection, and if the company's sold, your stock will get sold too, and you won't be left holding the bag. Or if the company only makes money but never is acquired or goes public, there's a way for you to get paid back. Those are the types of things in the standard term sheet. But I'll tell you, the hot button issues for those of you who've been through these exercises and counsel in the room tend to be valuation, of course, participation, which is you get your money back first, and weighted anti-dilution, or what happens if the price drops. For our standard term sheet, we want to have a balance on price with the entrepreneur. We actually do not want to buy a majority position in the company. We don't want to buy a very small minority, but we want to have a nice balance. We prefer weighted average, which is what most people call the friendlier form of anti-dilution. And we have done some as participating preferred, more I think these days not participating preferred, because again, the later round, you don't want someone who's coming in with a ton of money now to get their preference on top of yours. So we really try to run it pretty vanilla, because what goes around comes around. We put something fancy in, the next guy's going to really try to be fancy.
Well, let me. We're coming up to 8 o'clock, but let me ask some more questions about sort of the behavior of angels and what angels do. I mean, on average, and this is to the group, do you find the most value added from an angel is from assistance? Well, first of all, they give you money, so that's probably the best. Second, is it assistance in management? Is it identifying customers? Is it facilitation of the subsequent round of financing? Do you have a sense as to where is the most value added, or where should an angel, after they've made an investment, focus their energy?
Well,
Do you have a sense of
I
that?
think you got contacts are important. Clearly, if this entrepreneur knows a little bit about the market, but if the angel is typically has a little more extensive knowledge in the market, perhaps has had a business in that market, so they could provide valuable contacts. Plus, since the entrepreneur, the angel has typically been an entrepreneur once or many times over, they tend to be able to look a little bit over that hill and say, you know, maybe you're burning your cash too much. Maybe this is what's coming. Maybe we better prepare for it. So if anything, that angel can give the view at a strategic level a little bit further in advance, while the entrepreneur is running around like crazy making sure the floors are swept.
Consistent with that, there's probably about 20 sources of capital available to a company over its life cycle, starting from credit cards all the way up to a sophisticated investment capital money. And it's very important that angels fit in one place in that cycle, and that the value of what you just described is perceived the same way as the money coming in. If we're just a money operation, I suspect that angels would pass in time.
Be no
But
fun.
it's important, I think, for the other side to perceive that value. Yes, the potential's there for the experience, the know-how, the Rolodex, all those good things that angels can bring to a deal. But if the other side just says, well, I didn't like the way the money came in, that's a mismatch.
Oh,
It's very painful.
It's
You know,
an
Jerry,
ugly marriage. You're absolutely
It
right.
wouldn't be fair to leave an impression that the venture capitalist functioning properly isn't doing the same thing, because the effective venture capitalist is bringing in not only the bigger checkbook, but the Rolodex, the experience base, many of them certainly. You know, not all venture capitalists are merely recent some business school graduates with finance training. A lot of venture capitalists, especially today, have deep operating experience, include significant entrepreneurs within their midst as partners, and are able to provide help, facilitation, encouragement, all of the things that we say angels are there to do. So I think effective venture capitalists do all of those things too. The problem probably comes from the spread, that I think there you can
Absolutely.
find more readily, you can find stereotypes of venture capital firms that behave as if they are only bankers, period. Whereas it's unlikely you're going to find very many angel groups that are merely writing checks. Most of them want participation, so they're going to get in the act. But the good VCs, and a lot of them in this community, are very actively engaged in company building in every aspect of the company building sense.
I absolutely agree with your last part of your observation, that the spread is what's the interesting part.
But I think there is one other really big difference for the entrepreneur. And Ed talked about the psychological reward for the angel investor. How many times have I been talking to an entrepreneur, we're talking about investing, and they want to know, is somebody in particular in our group, is he or she going to invest, and why? Typically that person that they're focusing on, and they've met and they've come to know, has started a successful company in their sector. We backed a security company about a year ago, and that founder was very interested in the security experts in our group and whether or not one in particular was going to invest. It's hard to be an entrepreneur, as many of you know. And to know that someone you respect and you look up into in an industry says, Dan, I think what you're doing is good enough for me to write a check out of my bank account and give to you is a huge psychological validation at a time when probably your friends, your spouse, your family is all saying, why are you doing this? Why are you starting a company? Didn't you hear that was bad? And then someone who's been ahead of you in the industry says, no, this is good. You can do it. That's really, really important.
I want to ask Jeff a question. Jeff, when individual angels invest as opposed to organized groups, is there a greater tendency for them to take common stock?
You know, it was interesting. We've done a number of studies on terms and conditions, both angels and VCs. 10, 15 years ago, common stock was the flavor of the day. It was
Right.
almost exclusively. Now you see a lot more of this the preferred stock option. So
Even
even in
with
the individual
individuals.
angels. So everybody has realized the benefits of the preferred stock.
Right.
So common now is really left to the entrepreneur pretty much.
Okay.
Hate to say it that way, but I guess
No,
it's true.
I hear snickering. It's
Well, it's
not a
supposed to
bad
be that
thing.
way.
They're running the company.
I mean, right, it's
I would say that based on the deals that we've seen, that's one of the common things, no pun intended, that needs to be undone is getting investors out of the common to make sure that the common price and the valuation is set low for the entrepreneurs. So that's something that needs
and
to
that's your
often
stock
be
options
unwound.
too. That's
Yeah.
that's your
So that's
your
something that has
employer.
to be
And it
unwound.
isn't meant to be trivialized. There's a lot of money to
Exactly.
be made on the leverage of common stock, too. It is.
Yeah, you want to tell your employees, oh, I'm sorry, your stock option prices, strike prices,
$7.
$7. Good luck. You know,
So
I
are you
mean,
going to change the name to Preferred Angels to be a
I've
little
thought
more
about it.
clear?
But
That wouldn't be a bad
Oh,
name.
I shouldn't have said that.
Wouldn't
The
be a bad
name.
URL's gone now,
But they'd
I'm
have
sure.
to change the meeting location.
Yeah.
Series A Angels, maybe, or I don't know. Just thinking.
Preferred Angels.
Do you have a
That's good.
sense as to?
Preferred Angels.
I'm interested.
I like
I
it.
want to get sort of inside of the head because there's many angels that are watching us tonight. Is there a sense as to how many hours per week or per month do you show up at the guys' offices for your investors? Do you have them send you a reporting package every 20 minutes? I mean, how can you give me a sense as to what it
One of
sort
our
feels like?
members is Ken Morris, who runs the MIT Entrepreneurship Center, and Ken always says, say right up front what your value proposition is. And the value proposition to the individual angel is absolutely, it's about a 10-to-1 time ratio. Ed, how much time you spend with Common Angels?
With common angels.
Yeah. Meeting a month for
Meeting
a few
a month,
hours,
right,
couple phone
and-
calls, email.
A lot of email.
Yep.
A lot of reading of stuff that you're sending out to everybody.
4 or 5 hours a month, probably.
Oh, no, more than that.
Uh-oh. So
more
much for my
than that.
value proposition.
In total?
Yeah.
For common angels?
Yeah.
You mean not including deals that I'm personally involved in?
No, I'm just talking about is Common Angels.
But then the second question.
No,
might
I
be-
would say maybe 10, 12 hours a month.
Okay, and if you were to do all that individually?
Oh, it would be
here it
a
comes.
lot more than that.
But I
Lot more.
don't forget, when you do it individually, you're still investing with 5 to 7 other folks. So there's a lead
Well,
investor.
yeah, but there's
The
a
lead
time is
investor will definitely put in those hours as a lead, but not necessarily the followers.
You know, when you talk about investing with 5 to 7 others, if the 5 to 7 others were different 5 to 7 each time,
Yeah, the learning curve.
then you got a big learning curve problem. If I've got a group of friends and it's 5 to 7 friends and we always invest together, then we are the same as common angels, just on a smaller size.
But what I'm saying is it's not always, for example, a lot of angel groups even operate that way, where they'll have maybe 100 members and 5 or 6 or 7 will coalesce, and it won't always be the same.
No, that's
But
right.
you
That's
build
what
up,
we do.
and that's all part of that informal network, and you build up that trust. There's
Correct.
that whole area of trust, so it may not be the same 5 to 7. Even in the informal network, you'll have your 20 to 30 friends that you feel very comfortable with. And, you know, if it's a software deal, the lead person will be the software. So I think the time, but also keep in mind that, you know, the time is spent before the deal because it's the marriage without the
Right.
divorce.
Correct.
So if you really do the work and the entrepreneur does the work, then the marriage is successful. I mean, what fun is a marriage if you're always working at it?
So I agree with you that a lot of...
Well, maybe I shouldn't have said it that
I don't know if
way.
I like where this is going.
I could answer that question.
Well, what fun is the Porsche if it never gets, never mind.
Horses in the garage. What are you
If it's
talking
always in the
about?
garage, right. Thank you.
You know, a lot
you're only
of
25. Where'd you get a Porsche?
individual decisions to invest are made on the basis of who else is going in to the
Absolutely.
deal, and you trust somebody else's judgment. But maybe James either knows this or has run a survey or ought to run a survey within Common Angels.
just got homework.
To ask how many of us have been investing blindly. And I don't think there's a lot of that.
Oh, I doubt it. Very right.
I think that there may be that, well, if that person and that person are going in, it makes me feel more relaxed. But I doubt that I'm going to behave as an automaton, and if that one raises his hand or her hand, that I'm going to say, oh, great, then I'll be in too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So I think there is a greater sense that you are making an individual decision on your own relating to a situation where you have choice. You don't have to invest in every deal. You can see if you really want to move a lot of money, you can move a lot of money, and you still don't have to be investing in every deal. You can invest selectively.
Absolutely.
So you have to do some degree of homework
Oh,
to
absolutely.
have a feeling of personal comfort that, that you've done this.
Well,
You know, there's leverage too in the committee process. Almost all the
Right.
angel groups have a screening process, a due diligence process, teams that form up to do the various functions. And that's a lot of outreach to take away the time that's required to do it if you did it individually.
But it
Yeah, I
also
mean,
makes
it's heavy lifting, and that a lot of that heavy lifting is taken off of the individual.
but
Precisely.
also it takes a lot of the heavy lifting off the entrepreneur. I mean, one of the old school things that drove the formation of Common Angels was, I mean, people who formed Common Angels saw entrepreneurs going around, one angel at a time. Oh, can I show you this deal? Can I show you this? And you'd say, oh, one thing, well, I need to know about the customers. And you'd say, I need to know about your manager team. And I need to know. And it was all different. And now you have these groups. And I'm not going to say that groups are perfect. Groups have their flaws and groups have their place. But at least the diligence is both systematic. And if Ed makes a customer call, that customer call gets into our collective notes. And then that's shared. It doesn't have to be redone 4 or 5 different times. Much easier for the entrepreneur.
But Dan, the point that Jerry and James just brought out really says something about motivations. The people who are serving on those committees are putting in massive amounts of time. They don't get a bigger stake. This stake they're getting in the deal is only a function of how big the check is that they're writing. Yet, if James were to list who are the people who show up at every one of the screening committee meetings and who put in huge amounts of time, they tend to be a small group of people who are getting an enormous amount of personal pleasure and satisfaction by that level of commitment. And they aren't making another dollar relative to the other person who just goes to the meeting, reads the documents, and then puts the check.
But this is I think the opportunity for some more academic research. And I know we want to go to Q&A.
And that doesn't happen in a VC.
But I will say that the people who do come to those screening meetings and do participate disproportionately do rotate over time, and that the most active members of Common Angels have titles. They're called former CEO or chairman. And that usually means someone who sold a company or just brought in a new CEO, and they're used to running 80 hours a week, every week, and they played golf all last week. Is there a board I can get on?
Yeah, I was going to say maybe this would
Gee, I'd like to work with another startup company.
This might dovetail into the marriage problems.
Well,
that,
yeah, actually, I have had
earlier,
some
but
spouses say, James, can
just-
you find her a board seat? She's been around the house too much.
So should we charge these guys?
No, but I think there is a natural phase in one's career
service.
that sort of is a matter of transition, and then the number one way we lose people in Common Angels, they start another company.
Right.
They're repeat offenders. They can't help themselves. Oh yeah, no. People say we're serial entrepreneurs at Common Angels. Oh no, you're recidivist entrepreneurs. Why are you starting this company?
This isn't Harvard, buddy.
Yeah.
Just,
I can't help myself. Yeah.
So
Just one short thing. That's the trade-off, though, with the higher the visibility, the more deals you're going to get, the more back office, the more screening you're going to have. And
Right.
More
that
recidivism.
happens.
More recidivist.
So how much time do you spend with the companies, though? So I got a sort of a sense as to, the screening, the assessment, the determination, the negotiation. What about after you've made the deals? Do we, and this is to the group, how much time should you spend with each portfolio company? How much time would you like to? And sort of what are the tasks? I guess we touched on what are the tasks you help with, but is it a few hours a month? Is it a systematic thing? How does it typically work?
It depends.
data?
But, it's hard. It's a tough answer. the research indicates that there's a huge spectrum around that. If it's very, very early stage, one entrepreneur who has zero management experience, you're going to be doing a lot of work with that entrepreneur. If the management team is in place and you've helped to round out that management team and it's a little further along and there's some sales, then you're just kind of nudging. If you're setting the course and you're plotting it and you're navigating it, it's going to take a while. So what you want as an angel investor is to have a portfolio. Those that you're setting the course, those that you're nudging with little corrections. I don't think any can be on automatic pilot, but those that are later stage, and then you could be at the very high strategic level. So you as an investor want to both have that portfolio, which would then balance out your workload, and also as the entrepreneur, you want to make sure that that angel who's going to be the lead has the time. If you're in the need of a lot of time at the early seed stage, you want to make sure that that angel has that time to give in their portfolio.
But I think it's a two-way street. You know, this is a very important subject of discussion between entrepreneur and investor. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like, please don't show up at my office. I want to run this company. And then there's someone say, oh, could you help me? You know, and it may depend on the day of the week. But I have seen angels come in and become management, not out of, because asserting themselves, but because the entrepreneur or founder really wanted them. I mean, the most recent investment by Common Angels is a spin out of the math department here at MIT, and the founder's a professor who hooked up with one of our members who, Ed's smiling because Ed's on the board of this, and Ed was on the board.
And first investor.
And and that's very important. I was the first investor. Don't miss. Let the record show Ed Roberts on video was the first investor.
First investor.
And
as an individual angel.
As an individual,
Jeff,
before Common Angels would even look at it.
Right.
Why do I think we're going to see this in court at some point?
Yeah, no, it's on record. And but the person who came in was an investor, but he also was a 3-time company founder, the third of which became a public company, and Ed was on the board of that public company as well.
Right.
So how much time does one spend? It depends, but that was with the agreement of the professor. It wasn't imposed on him. He was, I think he's happy. At least he told me so.
I like your portfolio model, Jeff, because I think it's really, at these early stages, these companies are not as predictable and smooth as you might find later in their growth cycle. And you can't always anticipate where the need's going to be. And if you're too far or the portfolio is lopsided, you're going to get caught in that time trap. So it's a good model to go forward.
Just another couple of questions, and then we're going to move on to some Q&A. Do you get a sense that as an angel investor, you have a different focus for the company for liquidity? Do you like to see companies that are going to be in an IPO trajectory? Do you want to see companies that are going to be positioned for M&A transactions? Is there any sort of thing that you think that the angels steer them towards? Is there a preference?
Oh, I know for Common Angels I can answer that because we actually had a working group last year spend 3 months on our investment strategy. And that investment strategy is less than $5 million on the first round, less than $20 million over the life of the company. The average M&A deal in technology last year was $25 million. We like to make money on that average deal because that's actually most of the ways companies exit. To have to be committed to an IPO is also being committed to many rounds of financing, probably more time, a lot more money, and frankly, a lot more dilution. You may make less money as an angel on an IPO than you would on an M&A.
Well, I'll give you a little data. Only during the bubble did IPOs exceed M&A as the exit for high-tech startups. Only then. All other periods previously, and I think again now, mergers and acquisitions were the dominant form of exit strategy for startup companies. So it's only an illusion of people who really did all of their learning during the period of time when some of us were doing all of our losing, that they have thought that the IPO is the dominant route.
And keep in mind, the M&A is a clean exit. I mean, you're done. IPO, you've got your lockup period, then you watch as the stock goes up, and then you watch for the next 6 months when you can't sell it and it goes down. So the M&A is somewhat of a clean exit, especially if it's a cash deal or for a publicly traded.
I mean, a quick example, last year with Common Angels, we had invested in a company called Sand Video, 9 founders, all out of MIT. It's a fabulous semiconductor company. One round of investment was with 2 venture capital firms. It was $8 million. 18 months later, sold to Broadcom for $77.5 million.
Nice.
That made people pretty happy.
Yeah.
That was good.
Including us, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was good for the founders, but also one other thing that I think made people even happier, the 2 key founders became angel investors,
Yeah.
and they joined Common Angels. They made enough money,
Cashed out
and now they're,
entrepreneurs.
now they're repeating
Joined
the
us.
cycle, and that mattered too.
But are they recidivistic? That's your question.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so keep a track on them.
It's
Okay.
chronic.
Well, I'd like to open it up now for questions. We've got microphones here. If you could come down and speak into the mic, you can ask your question to anyone you'd like.
Hello? Okay. Given that a lot of tech entrepreneurs in the audience, I'm sure everybody wants to know just what kind of companies you're looking to invest in. Obviously, it's a question, well, you talked about, obviously, it's got to be a good deal, but other kind of trends. Is it biotech? Is it other, what kind of companies are you investing in? I think that's a very interesting question to the audience.
So I'll try to answer that globally and then turn it over to some specifics. Speaking for Angel Capital Association, there's a simple rule in angel investing. Birds of a feather flock together. So you find in Common Angels a lot of people from software, but related things that look like software. There's another group in town called Angel Healthcare Investors. It's mostly healthcare veterans. Across the country, you see the aggregations of the local business leaders, and most of these organizations have their exact profile, including down to some of the specific sectors on their website.
Yeah, I could give you the actual numbers U.S.-wide based on our research. You've got, and don't quote me on this, but it's a little over 20% in software. We break out life sciences and biotech. So life sciences is about 15, biotech's about 10, and the rest are somewhere around 8 to 10, financial services, things like that.
Okay. We're going to take some
Could I have a
calls from the
follow-up to
remote. No, you may not.
No.
Thank you.
He's a tough moderator.
We're going to take some calls now from the remote sites and continue to cycle. I'll let you guys. Sure. So anybody who'd like to call in from outside, please, now's the time to do it. But
Do they have the number?
I hope so. I don't.
I don't. Can I call in?
Could you use your
may.
cell phone, Jay?
Sure. Go ahead.
One of the things that you didn't discuss when you were talking about preferred versus common was convertible debt. I'd love to hear thoughts on coming in as convertible debt. And in keeping with that, controversy that I have been overhearing some recently is whether angels coming in prefer to see an existing term sheet that they will be participating in, or whether, and I'd appreciate some different responses on this, or whether you prefer to come in and sort of have your term sheet be the one that you're working with.
Okay. So the question is convertible debt, good or bad, and should you create your own term sheet for investors?
I think there's many deals made with convertible debt and done soundly. It depends where you are. My earlier observation was, once I cataloged all the sources of capital available to a company in its life cycle, it comes out 20 plus of different types. Convertible debt fits a very interesting place until companies are really ready to the scrutiny, I believe, of the angel investment. For example, there's other places, depending on what subsequent needs of the company will be in their capital structure. But it's a very clean instrument. It can be tied to equity, so it has an upside potential. Can be discounted to give incentives to some of the early risk takers. So I think it's a very sound.
Okay, you wanted us to disagree? I'm going to disagree.
Now we hear from the institutional model.
Well, no, I just...
You like that term?
Yeah. No, and Common Angels has used convertible debt as an instrument. The caution I just want to give is a double-edged sword. You know, you got to think about what, I used the term earlier, incentives are, and you want to align the incentives. This investment that we made that Ed was just talking about actually is right now is a convertible debt instrument, and there will be an equity round shortly. But you've got to be careful as an entrepreneur about using convertible debt. It's very tantalizing. For those of you not familiar with this, this is a debt-like instrument that usually upon some event is going to convert to equity. And people tend to like it because they say, oh, it's cheaper. The legal costs are less. Well, that's a little bit of an illusion, because it turns out that if you get a really good price on the equity, later your investors are saying, what did you do? I'm not paying that. In fact, I want a lower valuation. And then you get a fight with your investors. I mean, that's so bad. I mean, you want your incentives to be aligned with your investors. You want to work together as in a team. And if convertible debt at the time you're doing the investment makes that happen, great. It's efficient. If it's much more of an equity co-owner relationship, do that.
Okay, we actually have our first international call. It's Dave from Toronto.
Hey.
Hi, Dave.
Take off, Dave. You're on, eh?
Good, well done.
Dave from Toronto, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Go ahead, thanks.
Okay. My question is also an angel investor, and I've been involved in a number of situations where the first round of capital is readily available, but there is no guarantee to the entrepreneur that the second round is going to be available either from the same investors or that the investment group is going to be able to come up with that second round of capital. How does your band of angels or your group of angels handle this situation?
Ed?
Oh, are we the group?
I think you suffer through it if you're interested. I think you're wary of it because you worry as an investor the same way that the entrepreneur ought to be worrying about each of those rounds of investing. And if it really looks as if the kind of money that's going to be needed at a later round is either very large or it's going to have to come under particular difficult conditions, that's a discouraging factor that will discourage the initial investment.
Yeah, actually, I think this is a real problem in the capital markets. Common Angels adopted a criteria a couple of years ago of wanting to make sure the round we participate in could get the company to cash flow break even. We can imagine that eliminated a lot of companies. But that was protecting ourselves. And why was that? Because just as our gentleman from Toronto is saying, is the follow-on capital might not be there. That's a problem with the capital markets. That's not a problem with the angel investing. If you have a competitive capital market, there's going to be some sort of meritocracy or weeding out that's appropriate for the risk. The problem is the capital markets have been so out of whack the past few years, and probably will be for the next 3 or 4, that I think you're still going to see a lot of that defensiveness.
And the point is, oh, go ahead.
Right on track. I sit on the board of a venture capital firm, and I've watched how we very carefully manage the reserves for any investment we make to protect us and our limited partners in the subsequent round. It's just not a piece that's part of the angel framework right now, and you have to be willing to absorb that as the risk of going into an angel investor.
And keep in mind, too, that these markets are complementary, so it behooves the angel to make sure they have good working relationships to the venture capital to possibly get some deal flow going downstream. And it's also important to have good working relationships with the venture capitalists as the deal tends to go upstream. So you want your investors to have those contacts and good working relationships with people that could possibly provide funds or rounds that would be larger than an angel may be able to deal with.
Well, if I could ask you a favor, we've got somebody from Cleveland, Santi from Cleveland. After Santi, we'll get right to you.
That's interesting.
So, Santi, go to it.
Okay, I have a question. The question is, on average, how long is it expected that an angel network or group would wait for their return on investment in an angel investment deal?
I think
Well,
you said...
I'll give you an answer. Jeff probably has real data. But what I would suggest... You know, there are some fields in which I have real data too. So if you want to talk about studying entrepreneurs, I have real data. Studying angels, he has real data. It seems to me that one of the unique characteristics of angel groups is that they have, in general, a greater degree of patience as to how long it has to take or might take before the deal is finalized or before you're able to become liquid. And if they don't have that patience, then they can't do what they're doing. Remember, angels are coming in at the earliest stage. You don't become liquid in the middle of the cycle. You get liquid much later in the cycle. So angels who are, in general, experienced business people or experienced entrepreneurs know how long it takes to build a company to the point that there's some kind of a tangible outcome. And I think that the people in our group understand that if they run into an early liquidity event, hey, that's fantastic, but unanticipated. So I think that we tend to have great deal of patience, more so than most of the VCs.
But I think angels have traditionally have had patience. You're absolutely right. Let's go to the crazy times in 1999. In that day, the mantra was you'd find the deal on Monday, write the check on Tuesday, and expect to go public Friday. Now what we're seeing is back to
Now
historical...
we say next Friday, right?
Now we give it a 2 week. No, now we're seeing back to more historical trends, which is nice, somewhere in that 5 to 7 year range, because you're at the early stage. It's going to, and plus you don't want to exit unless there's value in it, because then the exit will not be worth as much.
But it's not an unlimited license.
Right.
The denominator of time works against you anyway, and sets the value proposition goal that much higher. Patience is important, and clearly an attribute of the angel space, but it's not a gift. It has to have the offset of a higher value proposition, or the math doesn't compute.
Right.
Okay, sir, you've been patient.
As seed or very early stage investors, under what circumstances, if any, do you feel it is suitable to call yourself a co-founder of the company?
Why does the labeling bother you?
I have served in various roles in early stage companies, and I was curious your perspective on what qualifies someone as a co-founder. As investors yourself.
I've been a co-founder of a lot of companies. When I am a co-founder, it's in a situation where, number one, I'm there and present in the really first formative stages of the company. That doesn't necessarily mean the time at which someone has an idea that a company ought to be created. So number one, that you're there at the formative stages. Number two, that the other people who are co-founders think that you're a co-founder. Now,
And they give you equity like you're a co-founder.
not just give you equity, but think that you're a co-founder in terms of feel that what you're going to be contributing to the building and growth of the company is of a comparable character, not necessarily magnitude, but character to what they're contributing. This week, I just agreed to go on the board of a startup company, 2 guys who explicitly came, and we've been talking for 2 months now, and asked me, will you become a co-founder of our company? And I was honored, because what they said was, they said that they felt that what had come out of the past 2 months of discussions was very influential on their thought process, on which way they were going, and they really wanted to include me as a co-founder. I hadn't thought of being a co-founder. I accepted because I liked the guys and I thought it was a nice thing to do. In other cases, I would say if you worry about when do you call yourself a co-founder, when does somebody else call yourself a co-founder, it sounds to me like it may be your hang-up, not their hang-up. So you got to be cautious about.
The couch is over here. We can.
We've got it right here, right next to him.
He said that. I didn't say that.
Tell us about your childhood.
That's what I told someone, so I agree with you.
Good.
All right. Okay, Miss?
It's a problem with too many angel investors. I've been working on biotech and pharmaceutical. I have already 7 investors who are all my mentors in the past, who know me more than 10 years, and they're friends because they are very successful CEOs, successful entrepreneur in the past. Their friends also want to invest now. So my question,
that's a good thing.
my question is that I have too many. It would be a problem.
Yes.
And do I have to put this angel investor on my board at all? They don't want to be on the board. I mean, it's like good mentor, you can see they want their student to be successful. And good angel investor, they really want me to be more successful. They see the joy to see the success, rather than just get the money.
Right. So what's the right number? How many
What's
should
the
you have?
number?
Well, first of all,
I would be nervous if there was about 30 angels at a deal, because,
Right.
I mean, these are independent folks, independent thinkers, and it's like a faculty meeting.
There's a mechanism for accumulating their investment of setting up an LLC and let them park their mutual interest up in that model, and the company only looks out and sees the investment of the LLC. It's a little artificial in managing it, but at least could give you a degree of separation as you make the investment. It's available to you with its plus and minuses.
First of all, this is a high-class problem to have, right? Most
Yeah.
people don't say, oh, I've got too many investors coming to me. What should I do? Good for you. It is wonderful that so many people who respect you are putting trust on you. Oh, yeah, that's good. And people who know you well. My guiding principle, first and foremost, is it's all about the relationship and it's all about the fit. Yes, you can use legal structures like an LLC. In Common Angels, we choose not to, but we have informal structures that set norms. We have process around it. I think it's up to you and some of your investors, in any case, not just the one you're speaking of, to come sort of agreement on what's the relationship, how's it going to work, is there going to be a lead person? And I think we always approach the situation as who's the best person and what are the right skills for the board, not just, there's no right at the table. By the way, including venture capitalists.
So we've got about 5 minutes left, so that's a little bit less than 1 minute for each question and answer that I see for people standing. So this will be the equivalent of speed dating without any of the risk.
We're really on this relationship thing, aren't we?
I didn't bring it up. It wasn't my idea to get married.
Don't blame me.
It's obvious that the angel capital market is fairly inefficient. And my question is, has a balance been reached between the amount of capital that's available and the startups that are worthy of investment? And does more capital need to be injected into the angel system for that balance to be reached, or are we there yet?
Since we only have a minute, no. And it's not even close.
Yeah,
There's a
not
huge
even
capital
close.
gap. Huge. I mean, you could use our estimates at least 3 to 4 times the amount of capital.
The early stage gap is still there as it has been for years and years and years.
Okay, sir?
Yeah, first I'd just like to thank the panel for a really engaging dialogue tonight. It's definitely been great to be in the audience and allows me to ask this question. When I left my last software company, the co-founder and CEO of the company, who's a veteran of 5 different startups, looked at me and said, Josh, when you start your new company, Vela Systems, take easy money. The first time around, don't get into anything too complicated. I'm reflecting on that now as we've completed a functional prototype and are starting to actually look for some funding, particularly in the context of tonight. It seems like individual investors are now really the first seed investors, and more coordinated, organized angel groups are coming second after that. I'm wondering if you guys could comment on that.
I would say, I did sports in high school and college. I still compete, and I never say, gee, I really want a coach who's easy. I think you want people who are going to be tough on you in a good way and hold you to milestones and accomplishments and, not be punitive on terms, but, share your ambition.
I don't think the metaphor is easy or hard. I think it's how professional it is. And I think what you're hearing is as the angels have evolved, they're learning to take a much more professional posture. So if you see your company with subsequent rounds coming, you might want to set the stage for professional investment early. So I don't think it's easy or hard. It's really what type of investment.
This is not charity. It's a financial deal. Keep in mind, there's psychic income, there's enjoyment, there's value add, but it is a financial deal.
Okay. Sir?
My question is, other than not meeting the 2 main criteria that you outlined in terms of 1 being a good deal and 2 being of interest to the angel or angel group that you're talking with, what are the most common, maybe non-obvious mistakes that entrepreneurs can make when trying to get angel funding?
Well, easily, it's losing focus of the fundamentals of a good business proposition. Somehow there's this leakage that says, well, if it's angels, what would you use the term, they might be softer or whatever in their approach. It's a very pragmatic business decision that sits on top of all this, and the best thing you can do is focus on a plan that has all the tabs lined up with the value proposition, the management, the markets, the intellectual property. A sound business plan is probably the best argument going forward.
I'll give you one other. Don't come as an individual. Come as a team.
Same.
Yeah. And by the way, there's big differences in startups between men and women as to whether what I just said is practiced. There's a much greater tendency for women entrepreneurs in high tech to come as individuals. Bad mistake.
Really? I would say the number 1 mistake is forgetting that you're fundamentally selling trust. This is a very trusting situation where you're taking other people's money and you have it. It's a one-way transaction. And if you get focused too much on the transaction and not about the relationship, it just doesn't work out. And that goes for both parties. Absolutely both parties.
And
both
actually,
sides.
at this point, we're going to stay here and answer some more questions. But it's time for us to say goodbye to the satellite audience right now. So they're going to turn the satellite off. We'll have a little break, and then we can keep doing Q&A on a local basis. So thank you, everyone here, for participating. And this is Cambridge signing off.